right, welcome everyone to another COVID-19 virtual town hall presented by the Arizona Medical Association. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're excited for this very hot topic that we're going to be discussing this evening with some great presenters joining us. Just a little bit of Zoom housekeeping for everyone. This is a professional environment and we ask that everyone remain respectful toward all participants. The webinar is being recorded, will be published for others to view at a later date. You can see and hear the panelists, myself and the moderators and panelists, but we cannot see or hear you. The webinar is best accessed through a computer utilizing the Zoom functions with the ability to submit your questions through the Q&A function. So throughout the night, we'll definitely ask that you please, any questions you have throughout the presentation, to please submit your questions through the Q&A and not through the chat. And then best viewing option is to fit the Zoom window to your entire screen. Tonight's moderators are Megan McCabe, ArMA's Deputy Director of Government Relations, as well as myself, Damian Johnson, ArMA's Director of Communications. Our panelists tonight include Rachel Zenik Garcia. She's ADHS's Deputy Chief of Public Health. We have Dana Goodlow, ADHS's Chief of the Arizona Immunization Program Office. Dr. Karen Lewis, ADHS's Medical Director of the Arizona Immunization Program Office. Dr. Ross Goldberg, current President of the Arizona Medical Association, and Libby McDaniel, Arizona Medical Association CEO. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and transition over to Dr. Goldberg for a quick update from ArMA.
Thanks, Damian. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. I'll be very brief because I know you're not here to see me. You're here to hear about this important topic. Just one thing as we continue to go through this, Libby and I continue to meet with all involved stakeholders. And as I don't have to tell any of you, our numbers are going in the wrong direction. They're going back up. Hospitalizations are going up. So I call on all of us to be vigilant, be safe, but also get that message out to our patients, their family, our friends. One thing to be aware of is we already went through one surge that required resources. There's a problem across the country right now, and there's a big ask for resources everywhere. So if we were to have a big surge, resources could be a problem getting it outside of the state. So because that does exist, we want to make sure we're aware of it now and try to mitigate any problems in the future. Since our numbers are slowly creeping up, we haven't spiked. I remind everyone and ask everyone to please be mindful, keep on doing everything that we've been asked to do, and remind everyone to participate with their mask wearing, physical distancing, get your flu shot. And with that, we will talk over now about vaccines, which will hopefully help us in this fight against COVID. So I'm done. I'll turn over to our esteemed panelists.
Thank you very much. My name is Rachel Garcia. I am a Deputy Bureau Chief with Arizona Department of Health Services. I currently work in our Health Emergency Operations Center, and I'm just absolutely thrilled to be here tonight with you participating in this ArMA Town Hall. We are joined by my colleagues, Dana Goodlow from the Arizona Immunization Program Office, as well as Dr. Karen Lewis, our Medical Director of the Immunization Program Office. And we will be presenting tonight some information from our COVID-19 Vaccine Task Force. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry, was that next slide? You cut out there for me.
Oh, yes, please, Damian. Next slide.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that.
Thank you. And some of the information that we will be presenting tonight, some of you may have seen in some of our past presentations. Most recently, we conducted a vaccine summit on October 30th, and some of this information was provided then. For today, we hope to hit some high notes with some information about vaccine. I'm going to turn it over very shortly to Dana Goodlow. We're going to talk about some flu resources for providers. Dr. Karen will give an update on the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices. And then we will talk a little bit about our draft COVID-19 vaccination plan that is currently under development, and give an update on provider recruitment to date for the COVID-19 vaccination program. We look forward to getting your feedback. I think this is a very important conversation, and we're happy to spend some time taking questions. And if there are enough questions, we look forward to coming back and continuing the dialogue. I'll turn it over to Dana Goodlow now for an update on flu resources.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Next slide, Damien. Hello, everyone. Really great to be with you tonight. I know that you all are super, super busy and have so many things going on, and we're glad that you're able to take a little bit of time to spend with us so we can share some information with you. Next slide, please. So just wanted to talk a little bit about our flu resources for providers here in Arizona. One of the things that we are encouraging providers to participate in this year is the Vaccine Flu Finder, because we think it's a really neat opportunity to have you let the community know that you have vaccine and that you will be vaccinating. In Arizona, I'm trying to get to my slides. I apologize. I'm trying to navigate two screens here. All right, I take it back. I updated slides somewhere else, apparently. I think for the public vaccine that we have available, so that's going to be the vaccines for children and the vaccines for adults, publicly supplied vaccine. We have about 74% of our annual allocation in the warehouse currently. So we have distributed several, and again, I apologize, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I thought I had pulled this up. There are still at least 125,000 doses available in the warehouse to be ordered. We are anticipating more vaccines to be coming in. So if you are a participant in the Vaccines for Children program, please feel free to order more. We would encourage you to encourage your patients and others in your community to be vaccinated against the flu. At this point, we know that that is going to be one of our strongest weapons with COVID this fall and winter. If we can help prevent hospitalizations and illness for the flu, that's going to be half of our battle. Part of the way that we do that is we have a roll up your sleeve campaign, and it is hyperlinked in the slide here for you. It has multiple pieces and components. There are print materials, posters, flyers. There will be social media pieces. There's TV. Now that we're past the election, you will probably start seeing more things on television. If you're a social media guru, you'll probably have already seen some of our work with Roll Up Your Sleeve. The neat thing about this process and this campaign is that we want to share it broadly. So if you have desire to have posters in your offices or have flyers to share with your patients, you absolutely can access them. And you can share if you have a logo for your local agency and you want to throw that onto this document, you're welcome to do that. So again, just click on the Roll Up Your Sleeve link and it'll take you to our webpage to show you all of the pieces that we have available to you. Additionally, every year we are updating our flu dashboard. This gets updated every week with our case counts, and it compares case counts over time. Again, it's a hyperlink here on this slide, so should have a lot of great information for you going forward. And this year, because we know that flu vaccination is so very important, we've also developed a toolkit for businesses, and this is just in an attempt to have folks take a look at if you wanted to host a flu clinic at your local place for staff, this would kind of walk you through how you might like to do that. So just a lot of neat resources available for you. And again, the bottom line is we have public vaccine, so please vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate. Next slide, please. Dr. Karen, I believe that these next slides are going to be you.
Yes, just want to talk to you about the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, their most recent meeting that was held last week, and some updates on COVID-19 vaccine. Next slide. One of the things they are very focused on is safety monitoring for establishing trust among people, transparency, understanding about safety with vaccines. Now, we know in general that vaccines are very, very safe, but with this COVID vaccine, they're going to even be putting more surveillance systems in between the CDC and the Food and Drug Administration, experts in the field, just really be following any adverse events after the vaccine is licensed. And even the picture to the right just shows a completely new surveillance system they're going to be using with healthcare workers or essential workers that are getting some of the first vaccines who are willing to. Will have a phone that will be tied to the CDC, and they'll be exchanging text messages on a regular basis as to what side effects they're having and get them tied into VAERS if they're having any side effects. So really getting down into great detail. Before there is approval, the ACIP corollary in the FDA, it's called VAPAC, Vaccine-Related Biological Product Advisory Committee, will look at the data from the pharmaceutical companies and make recommendation as to whether it should get emergency use authorization from the Food and Drug Administration. And then it will go on to ACIP to make recommendations to the CDC about prioritization. Next slide. Just wanted to go over the first 4 slides, the first 4 vaccines that will be coming down the pipeline. The first one we expect is Pfizer. And if you have seen the CDC Playbook, it's referred to as Vaccine A. Its initial target was 30,000 individuals blinded, 1-on-1 getting the vaccine and not. And so being able to look, of course, at safety, looking at antibodies, but also efficacy. They have gone beyond the 30,000 because they're also looking into the elderly, looking into 12 to 15-year-olds. Pfizer vaccine has to be stored at -70. And once it's thawed, has to be used within 5 days and has to be diluted right before it is given. So it's the most difficult of all the vaccines to give. And planning is going into giving it at larger locations where, since the minimum amount will be 1,000 doses, where you can get a large number of people. The Moderna vaccine is known as Vaccine B in the CDC Playbook. It's completed its enrollment of 30,000 participants. Like Pfizer, most of the participants have received their second dose of vaccine. Most of the COVID vaccines will require 2 doses from 21 to 28 days apart. And then watching for a couple of months afterwards for safety monitoring before the FDA will consider the pharmaceutical company's application, but it's coming close both for Pfizer and Moderna. The other 2 vaccines that are close to finishing up their enrollment in phase 3 and applying for EUA are using adenovirus vectors. And adenovirus that have actually been extremely attenuated, and then they're called non-replicating viruses. They have genetic material removed so that they can get into cells but can't get out, but they have the SARS, the DNA programmed for creating the SARS COVID-2 spike protein. And so that will, both of them use that mechanism in a little different way. Next slides. Both Pfizer and Moderna are messenger RNA vaccines. Next slide, Damien. And I just wanted to show you conceptually what messenger RNA vaccines are like. Instead of having the whole virus that gets in and replicates using its RNA to replicate all the viral proteins, there's just the lipid nanoparticle that has a messenger RNA just for the spike protein of SARS coronavirus 2. And so that slips into the pores of the cells and makes just the spike protein, which goes to the surface of the cells. And this is both for Pfizer and Moderna. Extremely purified, extremely targeted. Next slide. Then the adenovirus vaccines use the adenovirus DNA, again, modified so it's non-replicating, and it splices in the DNA sequence coding for the spike protein. So when the virus gets in the cell, it replicates the proteins, adenovirus proteins, and the SARS spike protein. And that drifts off to the surface membrane and stimulates the immune system. AstraZeneca, you may have known it as University of Oxford. It is a chimpanzee adenovirus. Next slide. The AstraZeneca needs 2 doses. The Janssen, I didn't show a model here, is a human adenovirus. Same concept, it only requires 1 dose. My final slide is ACIP is trying to decide about prioritization, determined that if you give adults the over 65, the vaccine in the beginning stages after healthcare workers, that is way that you avert the greatest number of deaths if you do vaccinating essential workers or high-risk adults. After healthcare workers get immunized, you'll decrease the greatest amount of infection. The earlier the vaccines rolled out, the better in terms of both preventing death and infection. We're going to have to use masks for quite a while, just because coronavirus is that contagious, and we don't know fully whether the vaccines will completely protect against disease or whether just protect against severe disease, and whether if you're fully protected, whether you'll still be able to shed the virus. The 2 questions that ACIP have decided that will be asked at their emergency meeting after FDA approval is, should the Pfizer vaccine be recommended for use in adults in the United States, and who should receive it? So they're ready to quickly answer those 2 questions. Back over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Dr. Karen. Okay, these next slides will provide an overview of our draft COVID-19 vaccination plan, which has been developed in partnership with our many county partners. Next slide, please. Right now, we have a draft plan posted on our ADHS website for review. The plan is a working document that's being updated as we receive more information from CDC. It is based on the CDC Interim Playbook that was made available in the last couple months. Most recently, there's been a version 2 that has been pushed out. Our first draft plan was submitted to CDC on October 16th, and it's been shared with all of our local allocators, our county and tribal partners for review and comments. And we look forward to receiving additional comments from this group as well. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of a figure from the Interim Playbook from CDC. The playbook itself is intended to assist states and partners in planning and operationalizing their vaccine response. CDC is prescribing a phased approach to vaccination where we know in the initial phase there would be limited doses available that would require highly targeted vaccination. So in all of our conversations with our partners, we are discussing both high demand and low demand scenarios when we're ramping up our supply. The CDC playbook itself has 15 detailed sections that cover all of the requirements of the program. Many of the sections focus on the IIS system requirements, including the Arizona State Immunization Information System. There are quite a few other program requirements detailed in the playbook. And our first draft vaccination plan really details all of the different 15 sections and is just the first iteration of how Department of Health Services and partners plan to approach vaccination in Arizona when a vaccine becomes available. The link here will take you to the new version 2.0 that was just pushed out last week from CDC and includes some updates on how CDC is partnering with federal entities as well as pharmacies to provide vaccination to long-term care facilities. Again, this is a working document and it continues to be updated as we learn more information. Next slide, please. The Arizona vaccination plan follows what we call a local allocator model. In the figure shown here, vaccine would be distributed to 15 county health departments and participating tribal facilities that choose to opt into the program. The plan itself gives an introduction to not just the phased planning process, but the importance of partner involvement. With our local allocator model, it is so key that we develop and build strong relationships with the partners and providers that will be administering vaccination in communities. The plan gives some information on lessons learned from H1N1 and past vaccination responses. There's a bit about the organizational structure and the role of VAPAC, that is the Vaccine and Antiviral Prioritization Advisory Committee, which is a state vaccine committee that will convene when a vaccine is available to make recommendations for the state of Arizona. It goes into a bit more detail about the local allocator system, which Dana will describe whenever we get to the vaccine distribution overview. With the way that the vaccine response has been evolving thus far in communication with our CDC and federal partners, we know that some tribes have decided that they will receive their allocation through IHS, while some facilities have indicated that they will opt into the state program in order to receive a state allocation from Department of Health Services. There are some other entities, I know this figure is very small, but there are some other entities that we expect will receive a direct allocation from CDC. They are not all listed here, but DOD and other federal partners would receive a direct allocation outside of Arizona's vaccine distribution. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of our Vaccine and Antiviral Prioritization Advisory Committee. It's much easier to say VAPAC. VAPAC will include key subject matter experts that will play a very important role in pandemic vaccine prioritization and allocation. The VAPAC is responsible for convening when a vaccine is available once we have an EUA and ACIP recommendation. They will come together and review those CDC ACIP recommendations and then provide an allocation plan for our state. ADHS will use those recommendations then to push out an allocation plan for the state and all of our local allocators. This slide here does show the organizations that are involved with VAPAC and the decision making. Many of the partners have been convened as part of a tabletop exercise series that DHS kicked off last month. We did have a tabletop right before October started, where we brought together all of those advisory committee partners to begin to talk about the important role that this committee will play once there is an EUA and ACIP recommendations for a vaccine. Dr. Karen, before I turn it over to Dana, do you have anything to add to VAPAC and the important role that they will play in this vaccine response?
No, well, I can say that in 2009, they were essential, and they actually targeted some populations of increased vulnerability that received a higher allocation. So this is just a very important part. Yes, we will accept CDC recommendations, but VAPAC will fine tune it for Arizona.
Thank you, Dr. Karen. Dana, I believe the next slides are yours. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So now we have just a couple more slides to share with you to kind of go over some more of the activities that we've been working on for months, quite frankly. This slide is a updated version of our vaccine distribution process. So the first thing that needs to happen, obviously, is that we need to be onboarding providers. So we developed a tool within REDCap so that providers can go online and complete the surveys within the tool to identify their location, the population that they can serve, their hours of operation, their cold storage capacity, those kinds of things. And the tool also will talk about some training requirements, since we know we're going to have some new providers that are new to the vaccination realm. There's some very specific trainings related to the use of ACIS and the use of storage and handling, digital data loggers, all of those kinds of things. If you're a VFC provider, you already know all of that. You don't need to take these trainings again. But if you're new to the vaccination program, you're going to need to have some training. So we really are encouraging providers to sign up as soon as is possible so that we can get through the onboarding process. It does take a little bit of time, but additionally, to be sure that we have opportunity and time to have training completed, and to be sure that everything is in place and we're all connected to ACIS and ready to actually order vaccine when vaccine becomes available. An additional piece of provider onboarding is the CDC is actually going to be contracting directly with Walgreens and CVS to provide vaccination to long-term care facilities that sign up and sign into the program. This would allow Walgreens and CVS to visit their facility 3 separate times, once to vaccinate staff initially in the early stages, then to go back to do second doses for staff and vaccinate residents, and then a third time to give a second dose to residents and then catch up anybody that they may have missed previously. And then you'll see also, as Rachel mentioned previously, with onboarding, some entities won't need to onboard with us at the state because they will get a federal allocation directly. They won't be getting an allocation from the state. So again, as Rachel spoke about, and I think Dr. Karen both spoke about our allocation plan, the FDA will provide an emergency use authorization. Then ACIP will convene and make their recommendations on the priority populations. Then VAPAC will convene, look at the information provided by the ACIP and make recommendations for Arizona. And then we'll start to see a little bit of what the CDC intends to share with Arizona. From there, we at the state level will further allocate the vaccine to the counties and the tribal entities that are going to be the local allocators. And that'll be based on the percentages and the decisions from VAPAC and ACIP and our leadership at the state. So in the initial phases of ordering, only our local allocators will be able to determine where vaccine goes. So they will select within their jurisdiction, within their county, or within their 638 entity, which vaccinators in their area should receive vaccine. They'll do that through an allocation tool that we have developed and have in test currently. Once those allocations are put into the allocation tool, that information comes into our office. We will actually place orders in ACIS send them to the CDC for fulfillment. Later on during phase 2, when there's more vaccine available, we anticipate that providers will be able to just log into ACES as they always do to order the vaccines that they need and want. For the distribution phase, CDC will be the distributor of this vaccine, except for the very first vaccine. The very first vaccine we anticipate is from Pfizer, and that will ship directly from the manufacturer. And that is because of its super special ultra-frozen requirements, and it'll ship in special thermal shipping containers. And we're trying as much as possible, Pfizer is trying as much as possible to not move this vaccine around multiple times. They want it to go straight from their manufacturing spot to the area where it will be utilized for vaccination. At the same time, McKesson will be sending out ancillary kits, and these ancillary kits will contain syringes and needles and bandages and instructions for how to dilute the vaccine, how to draw it up, how to administer, all of those kinds of things will be in the ancillary kits. All of these, I should say, there is no charge for vaccine, and there will be no charge for the ancillary kits. There will be a few extra needles and syringes in each kit, just in case something happens. Each kit should have an equivalent number of pieces to match the number of doses that will be received. And I think we don't talk about it in any of our slides, but there is determination from CMS that will be an administration fee, will be permitted. And we're still working with our partners to determine what that will look like. But the expectation is that an admin fee will be an allowable expense. Next slide, please. Again, please, next slide. So we, as I've said, have been recruiting since the beginning of September. To date, we have 811 individual provider locations that have started the process. The process got a little bit interrupted for a small period of time when the CDC put out their provider agreement, which every vaccinating provider is required to sign. We had to incorporate some of the pieces within the provider agreement into our tool. And so we've done that now. The tool is complete. We are not expecting any additional changes. We have 212 provider locations that have completed the entire survey. And we're working on getting those providers onboarded into ACES and then CDC. Additionally, to date, we have 83 locations been identified as phase 1 pod locations for vaccination in our very earliest stages. And again, we're working to try and get those folks all fully onboarded as well, so that when vaccine comes, we'll be ready. I don't think that we've mentioned it in our slides, but the CDC has actually told us to be ready for vaccine November 15th. Realistically, that is probably not going to happen. But it is entirely possible that we have vaccine as early as the first week in December. It really will depend on the safety and efficacy data that is provided by the manufacturers to the FDA. So hopefully we're going to know more very, very soon. Next slide, please. We have the ability to go into our recruitment tool and pull some reports for our local allocators, which again are the county health departments and the 638 tribal entities that have identified that they wish to have a state allocation. So we are able to pull reports weekly for our counties to let them know in their communities who has fully signed up to be a vaccinator, who needs a little extra push. But really to have a good handle on who the vaccinators will be in their community. And this is helping them to be ready to start making allocation plans when vaccine becomes available. As I mentioned earlier, the long-term care facilities have the opportunity to work with CDC and their Walgreens CVS partnership directly. We think at this point we have a tentative number, but it appears that about 400 400 long-term care facilities in Arizona have signed up for this program. So we're really excited to understand that there's going to be a lot of really good vaccination coverage at these facilities. Again, the onboarding tool is here. The link is hyperlinked for you. And if you are intending to be a vaccinator, even if it's not in phase 1, I would really strongly encourage you to get into the onboarding tool and get going with completing those surveys so that you'll have peace of mind and we'll have peace of mind knowing that you're ready to go when vaccine arrives. Next slide, please. And again, this is our final slide for today. Some hyperlinks for you as well. The first one, obviously, is our vaccination plan, if you'd like to take a look. We are still, as I've said, really, really encouraging providers to be onboarded as quickly as is possible so that we all are confident that we have the training and everything is in place that we're going to need. And then IPO Train is our learning management system. There are several modules within that. Again, if you're a VFC provider, your staff are probably very familiar with this. They're quick and easy modules for storage and handling, reporting in ACES, reminder recall, VAERS reporting, all kinds of different things that you may encounter in the entire vaccination experience. TAPI is the Arizona Partnership for Immunization. I'm sure many of you are aware of them as well. They have some training materials on their website. And then the CDC also has a myriad of things available currently and are working on several more things specific to the COVID vaccines that are anticipated, but also just general COVID vaccination materials. So those should be coming very, very shortly. And again, because we probably only said it 5 times now, I want to be sure it's on board as soon as it's possible. We are, like I said, expecting vaccine sometime in the next few weeks. So that, I think, that is our whole presentation, and we can turn it back to Libby and Damien for next step.
Great, thank you. And this is a very, very informative presentation. A few of our participants had asked in the very beginning, these slides are allowed to be shared with the participants for tonight? Just want to confirm that. Okay, perfect. So what we'll do is after tomorrow morning, we'll send out a follow-up email with this slide presentation attached for all the participants tonight, so you have a copy of it. And then we'll also make a copy available on ArMA's website too. One question that was submitted before or prior to tonight's town hall that I wanted to just kind of kickstart the Q&A off with is question started with, I would think there could be a role for an individual to get vaccinated more than one type of COVID vaccine. Is anyone looking into situations such as this? If one vaccine gives 50% immunity and a different one gives 65% immunity, would there be a benefit for that individual to get both vaccines?
Dr. Karen, that's all you.
It is highly recommended that the 2 doses be of the same vaccine manufacturer, because that's the only way it's gone through clinical testing. So we don't know if it will be, that second dose will be effective if you use a vaccine of a different manufacturer. And so it's going to be a challenge to make sure people get that second dose of the same. So putting the information into ACES will allow lookup, and also there will be vaccine cards coming along with the ancillary supply that you can fill out and give to the individual so they know what vaccine type they got the first time.
Great, thank you, Dr. Lewis. The next question that came in tonight is from Dr. Hammond, and he says, many patients say if I'm constantly socially isolated and wearing my mask 100% of the time, why do I need a flu shot when my chance of getting flu is so low? What would your response be to that type of attitude from a patient?
You know, yes, social isolating is wonderful. People still tend to come into your home, and often it's family members that bring influenza or COVID into your home. It's very important this year that everybody gets influenza vaccine so that we minimize the chance of influenza, so there'll be more beds for COVID. Disease is bad, vaccine is good. So if a policeman said, well, I'm not likely to get shot if there's an encounter, I'm not going to put my vest on, it just makes sense to put your bulletproof vest on to get the vaccine.
Great answer, Dr. Lewis. I think Dr. Goldberg wanted to speak to that as well.
Yeah, just also as a reminder, you know, out the world, I get that question a lot of, I'm doing one thing, so why do I have to do the other? There is no magic bullet here. Everything works together. They're all pieces of a puzzle. So it's not just doing one piece, it's doing all of it. So my answer is, well, great. You've done 2 of the 3 things we've asked you to do. Now do the third, which is get your flu shot. You don't get to cross it. If you get A and B, you don't need to do C. It's A, B, and C is what equals the 100%. So the pushback I would say is this is a all or none type of thing. You've got to do kind of all the pieces to really protect yourself. So that's why we're asking for the flu shot.
Thank you, Dr. Goldberg. I just want to remind the audience, if you do have any questions, to please do submit them through the Q&A function. That's how we're able to go through and answer some live and then type some responses as well to try and get to as many people as possible. One question I have from the audience tonight is the provider agreement that you discussed earlier, is that available to review now, or do you have an anticipated date on when that would be available for review?
The provider agreement is actually incorporated into the onboarding tool. So if you go to the onboarding tool, it's there. Now, it's a little bit tricky because you have to go through each of the pieces of the tool and the survey. We do have a mock version that I can share with Libby if you guys would like to see it. We have filled it out with cartoon character names, and we think we're kind of clever in that it's Ken and Barbie and SpongeBob SquarePants and those kinds of things. So I hope that you'll see the humor in it, but we absolutely do have that available. If it would be beneficial for you to see it, we're happy to send it along.
Great, thanks, Karen. Next question is, will you recommend vaccination for those who have had documented COVID-19 in light of the reports of recurrent disease?
The ones that have had documented disease will be lower on prioritization. CDC, ACIP will have to give us that guidance. Right now, it looks like cellular or antibody immunity lasts at least several months, cellular immunity even longer. We don't know because we don't know yet. It shouldn't hurt you if you've had COVID, not known it, to get the vaccine, just as a basic vaccine principle with almost every vaccine.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. It looks like we have a couple comments and questions regarding and concerns about the freezer and keeping of the vaccinations at that temperature, as well as being able to go through the 975 doses within that time frame, and some concerns with that. Would any of you be able to kind of touch up a little bit on that, if there's a plan in place for other freezer locations, or if they're unable to get through the entire 975 tray, and other things that have been working or in the works at ADHS on that?
Rachel, were you going to take that, or did you want me to? All right, I'll do it. So the intention with the Pfizer vaccine initially is going to be to vaccinate healthcare workers, healthcare personnel. And the CDC is really strongly encouraging folks to have pods and to do this in areas where we can reach a lot of healthcare providers all at one time. So closed pods may be at large hospital systems, those kinds of things. Pfizer is working on packaging that is more maintainable, but it's going to be months before we have that. So really what we're looking at right now is using these vaccines in large areas where we can go through a lot of doses quickly. And we're also encouraging our community partners to partner up. We have a little bit more flexibility with this vaccine than we initially thought that we did. We think that we have about a 20-day window from the time we receive it to the time it absolutely has to be utilized if you are not putting it in an ultra low temperature freezer. And the CDC continues to encourage us not to purchase those. So we're going to have a thermal shipper that will maintain the temperature with pelleted dry ice for up to 15 days, and then the 5-day window from thawing to administration. So we've got about a 20-day window. The thought is that perhaps a tray could be moved to a second location for another vaccination event. But again, the intent initially is to vaccinate large numbers of people with this vaccine. I will add that we think that the Moderna vaccine is a few weeks behind. And so we anticipate that the transition and the moving between phase 1A and phase 2 might actually be fairly quick. It really is going to kind of depend on the FDA's emergency use authorization, when the pharmaceutical companies actually request that, their safety and efficacy data. But we think we're going to have quite a bit of vaccine within a few short months.
Great, thank you, Dana. One question I wanted to ask as well as kind of a follow-up to that. You mentioned for our the community to partner together for the vaccine distribution. So one of the questions that came in was if their office being smaller would be able to sign up for partial vaccine distributions. So would that fall under partnering with other locations as well? Could you elaborate a little more on that?
I think the short answer is maybe. What I would encourage is to connect with your county health department. As we spoke earlier tonight, the county health departments are going to be the local allocators. So they're really going to be the ones that are going to decide where these first doses go. I know that they are all having these conversations with the large hospital systems and large medical groups in their communities. So those folks are already in communication. And again, our main focus is to be vaccinating healthcare personnel. So my best advice at this moment would be to try and connect with your local county health department to see if there's a way that you all could fit in and what that might look like in the early stages. It might very well be that some of the private practices have to wait just a little bit until there's additional vaccine available.
Got it, thanks. And I know you sort of covered this, but just to clarify, we had an additional question about of the other 4 vaccines that may become available. Do we know anything about packaging and dosing for those in terms of whether they require more than 1 dose and whether they require that deep freeze temperature that the Pfizer one does?
Only the Pfizer will require the deep freeze. And only Pfizer requires the minimal of the 975. All the others will be packaged in doses of 100. And some Moderna will be frozen, others will be refrigerator temperature. And actually there are a few coming down the pike that will be at room temperature. So it just depends on the vaccine. Virtually all of them will need 2 doses. The Janssen adenovirus vaccine is only in clinical trials with 1 dose. And there's a couple of vaccines coming in later that may require 1 dose, but as a general rule, they will need 2 doses. The antibody response initially after the first dose with these vaccines that require 2-dose, you get some, and then you get the second dose and the antibody level just really goes up to comparable to convalescent serum. So that second dose is important.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. This next question, based off of your answer there, may be for you as well. Do you anticipate
Damien, you broke up.
Now, I didn't hear you, Damien. Could you repeat the question?
I'm not sure which question.
Oh, I'm sorry if I cut out there. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Do you anticipate that the vaccines will be more immunogenic and of greater duration than a natural infection?
The antibody tests are comparable if you get the 2 doses. And the cellular immune response is good. The bottom line is we don't know. We will just have to see. I mean, we have gotten vaccines available in such a short time because of vaccine advances, federal money going on in to get rid of wasted time, and also federal government paying pharmaceutical companies to manufacture vaccine even before the efficacy studies are done. Normally you wait, you're not going to waste money if the FDA doesn't approve your vaccine, but millions and millions of doses are being produced. So as soon as there's that emergency use authorization, there's going to be millions of vaccines that will be coming off the shelves.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Lewis. The next question is, do all 4 vaccine candidates require dilution?
Good question. Didn't go into that in detail. Only the first one. Pfizer is the only one that requires dilution.
Great. Thank you.
And then another question here. What is the interval between the 2 doses for the Pfizer vaccine?
The Pfizer will be 21 days. The Moderna will be 28 days. And it varies with the different vaccines. So the emergency use authorization information, the manufacturer's information will be giving physicians the guidelines as to what interval to use for what vaccine. And the CDC, as it sends out the vaccine, is going to hold back the same amount of vaccine to then be able to send to the same practice in order to have enough vaccine to give the second dose at that location, to help you make sure that the individuals vaccinated get the same dose, the same manufacturer.
Very helpful. Thanks, Dr. Lewis. I think this question, anyone who wants to comment from the panel, please feel free. What do you feel will be the rate limiting step in reaching herd immunity with vaccination in the US?
I don't think any of us really want to answer that question.
We are going to have a very difficult time getting herd immunity in the US if the current trends of vaccine hesitancy continues. We know that with measles vaccine, we have to have 95% coverage or we run the risk of having a measles outbreak. So we're going to need to use, unfortunately, social distancing and masking in addition to vaccination, and then we'll see what the vaccine acceptance is, how long it lasts. Will we have to have yearly COVID vaccine like influenza? We'll see. Time will tell.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and finish off with these last. I'm going to try and combine these last two questions here before we go to finish out tonight's town hall. The first question is, can you comment on the pediatric dosing for the vaccination? And then the other question kind of ties into it is, what age groups are eligible for these vaccines?
Currently, only adults 18 years and older are eligible. Sanofi Pasteur is starting to do 12 to 15-year-old clinical testing. There is no pediatric clinical testing yet at this time, so there's no pediatric indication at the present time.
Dr. Karen, Pfizer is starting with the adolescents, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, just making sure. Yeah, it's the Pfizer
Yeah.
vaccine that is starting to do some testing with the adolescents.
Mhm. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to just thank all of our guest panelists for joining us tonight, taking time out of your evening. And then I'd also like to remind the audience that the town hall was recorded. We will publish it with permission of ADHS onto our YouTube channel, so you can go and view this at a later date. And like I also mentioned, with their permission, we will be sharing tonight's presentation with all of those who registered tonight, as well as making it available on ArMA's website. If you have any further questions or concerns that you'd like addressed, please do feel free to email us at communications@azmed.org, as well as just a quick reminder of all the resources that are available to you on ArMA's website surrounding telemedicine, COVID-19, different FAQs, and I believe we're going to be working on some FAQs towards the vaccinations as they become live, as well as COVID-19 financial resources. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight, and we hope you have a great rest of your evening.